Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started soon. Before we start, please note that this is a hybrid meeting with some participants attending via Zoom. And also note that this meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the project website in the coming weeks. As you signed in, you may have picked up a comment card, and there are additional comment cards available if you didn't happen to pick one up. If you have any questions you'd like addressed or comments that you'd like to share, please fill out the card, and we'll ask for those completed cards near the end of the presentation, and we'll answer questions as time allows at the end of the presentation. If you've already filled out your card, you can pass it off to this side of the aisle, and we'll collect those. And if you're participating via Zoom, you can use the chat function to submit questions at any time. And I will pass it off now to Bonnie to get us started.
Thank you, Cece. So welcome to this evening's presentation to plan for a sustainable future at Seacliff and New Brighton State Beaches. Thanks for taking the time to participate in inventing the future of these beloved parks. We have more than 200 people registered to be here in person this evening and more than 100 people registered to attend online. So thank you all for taking the time. I'm Bonnie Hawley, Executive Director of Friends of Santa Cruz State Parks. We're the local state parks nonprofit operating partner, and we support state parks and beaches throughout Santa Cruz County and coastal San Mateo County. And we help bring the community's love and support to our parks, to our work to ensure that our parks are thriving and available to all. So I'm welcoming you this evening on behalf of the park partners who, along with you, are working toward a resilient and recovered park. This is a community effort between California State Parks and community nonprofit partners, including Parks California, Friends of Santa Cruz State Parks, and also we have distinguished consultants, including Placeworks, Moffitt and Nickel, and Miller Maxfield. We also have staff from all of those organizations here tonight to help. So I'd like to take a moment on behalf of Friends to thank the community for the tremendous support for the Seacliff Resilience and Recovery Fund. After the storm in January 2023, we quickly created the fund to help provide short-term support followed by long-term investments in the resilience and public access for these parks. So far, we've received over $148,000 in donations from all across the country and from throughout California, so thank you. And if you're interested in helping, please visit the project website at seacliffresilience.org. I'd like to take a moment also to acknowledge some of our distinguished guests. We have County Supervisor Kim DeSerpa, and also Pearson Bradley, representing Senator John Laird. So thank you for being here tonight. So just a word about what's going to be happening here tonight. We're going to be hearing from state park leaders, watch a brief video, hear a presentation of the findings of the sea level rise vulnerability assessment and shoreline adaptation alternative study. We're going to learn about next steps, have a brief question and answer period, and then we're going to invite you to go outside to our Ask an Expert tables, enjoy some refreshments, stop by our information table, our park store, and also really invite you to stay involved, stay informed, visit the seacliffresilience.org website. So it's my pleasure this evening to introduce our State Park District Superintendent, Chris Sporer. Chris has worked for the Santa Cruz District for 28 years and has served as the District Superintendent for 10 years. Chris.
Thanks, Bonnie, for that introduction. It's really nice to be with you all here tonight. It looks a lot like our last meeting where we were very full, so we have excellent attendance, and I think that's great. So I want to welcome you all, and I want to thank you for your willingness to participate and put energy into this planning process. Our meeting tonight is going to focus on the outcomes and recommendations from our recently finished sea level rise, vulnerability, assessment and well, you can probably read it there, but it's the long name for our study. But we're going to be talking about the outcomes of that for both Seacliff and for New Brighton. The recommendations that you will see tonight are built on earlier work that we presented to the public about the current and future risks to our cherished beaches and the facilities there due to rising sea level and increased storm intensity. And many of you will have given us your input around what you value in your experiences at those parks and beaches. You will also have given us input on some of the potential solutions and landscape features that we presented as potential strategies to protect those facilities. So the recommendations that we are presenting tonight will reflect both the values that we heard and the approach to preserving those values into the future. So I want to emphasize that the hard work to evaluate and choose the options, the adaptations that reflect really all of our collective values, they come with trade-offs. And you will see those trade-offs in the concepts that are presented tonight. And I expect that everybody that's here tonight will continue thinking about that and continue talking about it as we go through this planning process. So trade-offs are usually things that you have to give up in order to gain something else. And that can be difficult. And why do we have to give up anything? I don't really want to do that. But, you know, it might be helpful to think about some of the words of our local oceanographer, Dr. Gary Griggs. Climate change, it's real. It's now, and it's everywhere. So our responsibility, the way we respond, is to use the best available science, input from the public, and plan to adapt to make those facilities and those beaches and those shorelines that we love so much more resilient into the future. And it's trade-offs that happen in order for us to make those adaptations. I also want to emphasize that we will be sharing concepts tonight, concepts that provide a framework and guidance for more detailed plans for the future. But nonetheless, these concepts will be guiding our future actions. And I also wanted to kind of point out, you heard from Bonnie that we have a project website. You'll see how to get in touch with that. It's also on the handouts that we gave. But we have a lot of additional resources there. Really, this is really complex stuff where there's a really dense amount of information. I encourage everybody to go to that project website. We have the entirety of this study and report we posted there. We have a new storyboard there that gives really great graphics and additional information about coastal processes. There are also historic photographs. There are really interesting articles. And we also have a glossary, frequently asked questions. So really good information. The other thing you can do there is get in touch with our project staff. So if you have additional questions you have or comments, you can do that there. So I want to really thank our professional parks staff. I want to thank our committed partners and our excellent consultants for all the work they did to get us here. And I'll turn it back to Bonnie. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Next, I am very happy to introduce our Deputy District Superintendent, Jordan Burgess. Jordan has served as the Deputy District Superintendent for the past 6 years, and she has been with the Department of State Parks at the headquarters level prior to her local role here. So, Jordan.
Thank you, Bonnie. So as Chris mentioned, much of tonight will be focused on the long-term future adaptation strategies for Seacliff and New Brighton. These two state parks are so important to our local community, And I think that's evident with the turnout tonight, both here and online. And I'd also hazard a guess that while you all care about the future, you also care about the now. So I'd like to take a quick moment before we get into the future to talk about what is happening at Seacliff now in the short term and what you can expect to see. A key takeaway from the vulnerability assessment that you'll hear more about shortly in the presentation is that most of the park facilities at Seacliff State Beach are vulnerable to coastal hazards. That's something important to note, and that will guide our actions at state parks as we move into the rainy season and potentially more storm impacts along the coast. So what this means practically for you and for us is that we at state parks may close some facilities to protect the facilities and to protect you, the public, during storm events or weather events. Similarly, following storm events, our crews will clean up and restore areas in a cost-effective manner. So what does this mean? It may mean that we have to wait a little bit longer to come in and clean. We may have to wait for some periods of weather to clean up, some periods of clear weather to clean up before maintenance occurs. So for example, sand may build up in the parking lot during the winter, but then we will clear it up before the summer season or when it seems the weather impacts have passed. I fully recognize that these impacts will impact you all. But as Chris indicated, there are trade-offs to all actions, and we have limited funds to address everything we'd like to address at these parks. While these long-term plans are being developed, we at State Parks have not received any additional funding specifically for interim repairs, aside from one specific project I'll speak about in just a minute. That said, we have reprioritized our existing operational resources to address some critical health and safety needs, which you've likely seen some temporary repairs we've made. Our efforts have been guided by sustainability and capacity, with an understanding definitely that more support is needed. With that said, there are a couple of projects that we are working on now, and I'd like to tell you about them. Restrooms 7 and 3, and I know that's technical jargon, but they're 2 restrooms in the day use area, are being repaired to return to full operation, including some structural upgrades. This project is slated to be completed by the end of the year. And the exciting news there, when I just spoke about funding that we hadn't received, we just received our first FEMA funding for the project last Friday. Additionally, you will asphalt patching and wooden handrail repair along the wooden seawall in the day use area will be ongoing through December 2025. That's something we've heard loud and clear from you all that's really important. Additionally, some actions we've taken in the past that you can expect to see continue include pumping slurry into large sinkholes that present themselves so that we can make sure we're supporting important infrastructure like the walking pathway. Also, some emergent repairs to address new undermining of the seawall. Pumping sand out of pipes to make sure the restrooms continue functioning, and other key maintenance actions. I know that was brief, but with that said, thank you for being here with us tonight and being part of planning for resilience into the future for Seacliff and New Brighton State Beaches. And thank you for being partners in the current use, enjoyment, and success of these parks as well. I am a neighbor at Seacliff, and I use that park every single day. So like you, I love it, and I'm looking forward to resilience. The state park system is here for you, the public, the people of California, and we appreciate your partnership and input. With that said, I'll pass it back to Bonnie.
Thank you, Jordan. So before we get into exploring the findings from this study, we wanted to share a short video with you. It is available on the website, and it offers a powerful look at the vulnerabilities Seacliff State Beach experiences as a result of climate-driven disasters and the opportunities we have to adapt. Susie?
The coastline is always changing, and now possibly faster than ever. Seacliff State Beach and areas all along the coastline are increasingly impacted by climate-driven hazards. Large surf, flooding during storms, sea level rise, and erosion of beaches and cliffs. The historic storms of early 2023 caused catastrophic damage to our coastal parks, with devastating impacts on core elements of Seacliff, New Brighton State Beach, and the visitor experience. Between October 2023 and May 2024, Seacliff State Beach has experienced 7 seawall overtopping events, as well as erosion, debris impacts, and flooding that damaged park facilities. These hazards will continue. And Seacliff has a history of extreme weather. Recreational use at the beach has adapted to these effects over generations. The seawall has moved back and been rebuilt several times. The cement ship, which started as a casino and ballroom, over time has eroded into an artificial reef. Learning from this history will create a more resilient future for the coastline. As sea levels continue to rise and storm intensity increases in the coming years, the effects of these hazards are expected to grow. Improving the resilience of our coastline begins with studying coastal processes, planning for change, and adapting to new conditions. This process requires robust community input and science-based decision-making to succeed. While the storms of 2023 and their immediate aftermath were painful, the recovery process offers a chance to be visionary and strategic. We can plan for environmental sustainability in the era of climate change and ensure public access. Together, we can develop a vision of the coastal recreation that meets the needs of Californians.
Thank you for that great video, Bonnie. I am Cece LaGrange. I'm a landscape architect with PlaceWorks, one of the team members working on this project. We've heard a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight, and we're going to start by reviewing the vulnerability findings for 5 locations within New Brighton and Seacliff State Beaches and sharing those recommended preferred actions for increasing resilience in these 5 areas. We'll also share the big picture next steps and have time for Q&A in those Ask an Expert tables outside. Let's get started by talking about the purpose of the work that we've been working on so hard. The study's goals were to understand and document the hazards and vulnerabilities at Seacliff and New Brighton State Beaches, and to then develop recommended preferred actions to increase resilience at these beaches. This work provides technical guidance that state parks will use to inform future planning and design work. Taking these actions now will help state parks develop a more resilient future at Seacliff and New Brighton State Beaches. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on 5 locations at Seacliff and New Brighton with extensive facilities exposed to hazards. The study report, which will be available on the project website, includes additional locations in its analysis. However, these 5 locations, with their many facilities exposed to hazards, were prioritized for future shoreline adaptation. These 5 sites moving down the coast are New Brighton State Beach, Seacliff State Beach RV Campground, the Seacliff Day Use Area, Rio Del Mar Esplanade, and platforms at Rio Del Mar State Beach. The additional locations analyzed in the study that we won't be detailing tonight include Porter Cessnon and Potbelly Beach, which have no facilities, so there are no recommended preferred actions there. The Seacliff Upper Bluff area, which doesn't need shoreline adaptation actions as the day use area in front protects it. And Rio Del Mar State Beach along Beach Drive, which does not have park facilities for most of that stretch of the beach. We'll get started by providing a brief recap of the vulnerability findings, which were shared at the first project open house last year, and we'll also share some of what we've heard from the community. This table here shows the locations at Seacliff and New Brighton that we'll be talking about tonight, and the left half of the chart with the yellow, orange, and red shows how vulnerable each location is to different levels of future sea level rise. The right side of the chart, with the shades of blue, reports on the influence of various coastal processes on vulnerability in each location. Note that the Seacliff campground area is especially vulnerable compared to other locations in the park units. Vulnerability here is especially influenced by wave overtopping and beach erosion. Similarly, the Seacliff day use area is also vulnerable to sea level rise and greatly influenced by wave overtopping and beach erosion. At New Brighton Beach, vulnerability is most influenced by beach erosion and shoreline retreat. As part of our earlier work on this project, we asked community members to share what they most value about Seacliff and New Brighton and which activities they would most enjoy at these beaches in the future. We learned that participants valued the natural beauty and recreation opportunities at both beaches, and the most popular activities included running, walking, and hiking, observing nature, camping, and general beach recreation. We used this information, paired with our vulnerability findings and other considerations, such as the coastal regulatory framework, to inform the evaluation of different adaptation actions. We also shared information about possible landscape adaptations with the community that could be considered at Seacliff and New Brighton. We found that nature-based solutions to increasing resilience had the most community support. Nature-based solutions incorporate green infrastructure and include adaptations like erosion control planting, habitat enhancement, and vegetated dunes. Adaptations that depend on gray infrastructure had less community support. The information shared by the community informed the development and evaluation of adaptation themes, which we'll explore next. In this section, we'll be discussing the adaptation themes that were used to develop different approaches to adaptation at each of the 5 locations we're talking about tonight. These themes provide a framework for developing adaptation actions at individual sites. The adaptation themes include fortify and protect, which prioritizes protecting existing features in place; hybrid, which balances providing recreational access and making room for coastal processes; and restore and relocate, which prioritizes natural resource restoration and relocating assets to make room for coastal processes. These adaptation themes cover the spectrum from gray infrastructure, which incorporates traditionally engineered built structures, to green infrastructure, which includes nature-based solutions. These 3 adaptation themes were evaluated at each of the 5 study sites. For example, at New Brighton State Beach, the technical team developed a fortify and protect, a hybrid, and a restore and relocate themed concept for increasing resilience. A total of 15 themed concepts were developed. At each location, the 3 adaptation themes were evaluated for their potential effects in 3 broad categories: implementation and upkeep, which includes construction and maintenance costs, complexity of permitting, adaptability, and vulnerability of the built environment; policy and guidance alignment, which includes state guidance, parks policies, park unit planning efforts, and public feedback from earlier in the process; and resource preservation, which includes natural resources and coastal processes, aesthetics, public access, recreational opportunities, and beach loss or gain. Based on this evaluation, a recommended adaptation theme was identified for each location. And here are those recommended adaptation themes for the 5 locations. Fortify and protect, which prioritizes protecting existing features in place, is recommended for platforms at Rio Del Mar. The hybrid theme, which balances recreational access and coastal processes, is recommended for New Brighton State Beach, Seacliff RV Campground, and Seacliff Day Use Area. Restore and relocate, which prioritizes natural resource restoration and coastal processes, is recommended for Rio Del Mar Esplanade, the beach next to Aptos Creek. At each location, the recommended adaptation theme contains a suite of site-specific recommended preferred actions, which are the actions that are most likely to increase resilience at the location while meeting additional goals related to cost, permitting, resource protection, public access, and likely community support based on feedback received earlier in the project. The recommended preferred actions are unique to each site and its needs. We're going to take an in-depth look at the recommended preferred actions for each of the 5 locations now. And just as a reminder, what's being presented here are just recommended preferred actions. And as Chris mentioned, before any implementation can begin, these recommended preferred actions will require additional planning, design, permitting, and contracting work. This future work will include more opportunities for community input. It's important to note the timeline for these recommended preferred actions that we'll be discussing today. These actions are designed to increase resilience at the beaches in the near term, which is considered to be through the year 2050, though we did modeling for all 3 of these time horizons. The near-term timeframe was selected in consultation with the California Coastal Commission, and 2050 was decided as the target, as it will be both practical to the lifespan of facilities and allow us to utilize the most confident science and modeling. Conditions for further time horizons, such as the midterm in 2070 or even the long term into the next century, are much more difficult to project. Though we know for certain that things will change in the coming decades, we don't know yet exactly how they will change. Our actions today will help us plan for the effects that we are most confident about while laying the groundwork for success in the future. We'll start by looking at preferred actions for New Brighton State Beach and then move down coast to the other locations. At New Brighton State Beach, all 3 adaptation themes were evaluated. The Fortify and Protect theme is not recommended as it included seat blocks and riprap that would accelerate beach erosion and reduce space for recreation and habitat while incurring high installation and maintenance costs. The Restore and Relocate theme is not recommended either as it would reduce beach access, including emergency vehicle access. The Hybrid theme is recommended at New Brighton. The recommended preferred actions of the Hybrid theme here include relocating the restroom up to the parking lot and consolidating the access trail to a reduced ramp. The riprap fronting the ramp would also be consolidated and replenished. Native vegetation could be planted along the bluff to help reduce erosion. Evaluation of the hybrid strategy found that these recommended preferred actions will increase beach space for recreation and habitat, maintain pedestrian and emergency vehicle access, remove the restroom from exposure to coastal hazards by putting it up in the parking lot. At the Seacliff RV Campground, the evaluation of the 3 adaptation themes resulted in Fortify and Protect not being recommended, as this theme would require significant upfront investment and costly long-term maintenance. It might accelerate beach erosion and would face many permitting challenges. The Restore and Relocate theme is also not recommended, as it would reduce access through the removal of parking and pedestrian access paths. The Hybrid theme is recommended here. The recommended preferred actions of the hybrid theme at the RV campground include removing the campground area and timber seawall, installing vegetated dunes, consolidating and elevating the parking and restroom area, and replacing the timber seawall there with a concrete edge and seat blocks. Anticipated future actions, which may be needed as conditions change prior to 2050, include supplementing and replanting the dunes and replacing the seat blocks with a continuous concrete seat wall around the consolidated parking area. Evaluation of the hybrid strategy found that the recommended preferred actions will maintain public access along the length of beach via pedestrian trail, establish native habitat, improving local biodiversity, increase beach width for recreation uses. However, it would also require the relocation of the RV campground recreational use. Future work, which we'll discuss toward the end of the presentation, will include a campground feasibility study for this relocation effort. At the Seacliff Day Use area, evaluation of the 3 adaptation themes resulted in the Fortify and Protect theme not being recommended, as it would incur high upfront costs and costly long-term maintenance or replacement, would accelerate beach erosion, and would also face many permitting challenges. The Restore and Relocate theme was also not recommended, as it would reduce near-term access while there is still space to accommodate pedestrian access, picnics, and beach-adjacent activities. The hybrid theme was recommended here. The recommended preferred actions of the hybrid theme here at Seacliff Day Use area include setting the road back against the cliff base, consolidating parking, replacing the timber seawall with a reduced footprint concrete edge and seat blocks, installing native planting on the bluffs, and installing vegetated dunes on the back beach. Anticipated future actions, which may be needed as conditions change prior to 2050, include elevating the consolidated parking and picnic area and consolidating the restrooms into one elevated facility. Here, evaluation of the hybrid strategy found that these recommended preferred actions will consolidate facilities in a less vulnerable area at a higher elevation, help restore native biodiversity with dune and cliff plantings, increase beach space for recreation and habitat, support picnicking and a pedestrian trail, and improve retention of the beach by stepping back a majority of the seawall. Moving down coast, our next location is Rio Del Mar Esplanade, where evaluation of the 3 adaptation themes resulted in both Fortify and Protect and Hybrid not being recommended, as these themes would impact the broader viewshed with elevated facilities and potentially worsen river flood conditions. Restore and Relocate is recommended here. The recommended preferred actions of the Restore and Relocate theme include removing the restroom and the short seawall in front of it, and supporting the ongoing Living Shoreline planting project. Evaluation of the Restore and Relocate theme here found that the recommended preferred actions will reduce vulnerability from coastal processes in Aptos Creek, and continue support for native restoration adjacent to the creek. The final location we're looking at tonight is Platforms at Rio Del Mar, where evaluation of the 3 adaptation themes resulted in both the Hybrid and Restore and Relocate themes being not recommended, as both would reduce access by reducing parking. Fortify and Protect is recommended here. The recommended preferred actions of the Fortify and Protect theme include removing the timber handrail and installing a concrete edge and seat block. Anticipated future actions here, which may be needed prior to 2050 as conditions change, include building an elevated restroom and shower facility and elevating the parking area, which would require a ramped road up to the elevated entry. With the Fortify and Protect strategies, recommended preferred actions will maintain existing facilities and levels of access in the near term. As we mentioned earlier, these recommended preferred actions that we just presented will require additional planning and design work before implementation can begin. Before we get into those next steps, I'm just going to pause here and request that you please submit any questions that you have by passing your completed comment cards down the aisle to staff or submitting it via chat if you're attending remotely. So if everyone wants to submit any questions or comments they have right now, you can go ahead and do that. And you can also submit those comment cards to any staff member later in the evening. This study marks the completion of the second step in this timeline and is a major milestone toward increasing resilience at New Brighton and Seacliff State Beaches. By identifying adaptation themes and recommended preferred actions for our 5 sites, we're laying the groundwork for the next step, using this technical information from the study in a planning effort to envision the desired future for these beaches, shown in step 3. This third phase will include development of a campground feasibility study, which will determine where it is most feasible to relocate the camping capacity that formerly existed at Seacliff. The feasibility study will include New Brighton State Beach, Seacliff State Beach, and Sunset State Beach. It will also include the development of a coastal facilities management plan, which will develop the recommended preferred actions for each of the 5 locations into concepts for eventual implementation. Both of these work efforts, which we anticipate will occur simultaneously, will provide continued opportunities for public engagement. That's the end of the presentation, so we're going to go ahead and open up the Q&A session. If you haven't submitted your questions yet, you can go ahead and do that via the chat function or using the comment card. We're sorting through the questions that we've received so far, and we're going to be kind of grouping similar questions together by theme for answering, and we're going to focus on addressing questions that many people have, and we really encourage you to bring very specific or technical questions to a staff member at the Ask an Expert tables on the patio outside after the Q&A wraps up. We may not be able to answer all questions this evening, but we will post questions and answers, both those we provide tonight and any we don't get to, on the project website in the coming weeks. So please remember to visit the project website for that information. The website is also where you can find the final report and other resources, as Chris mentioned, and you can sign up for the project mailing list if you haven't done that yet. So we're going to focus on answering questions right now. If you have comments on this work that you'd like to share with the team, you can submit them to the project email by September 30th, or submit them on a comment card or via the chat right now. The comments will be used by the project team to inform the upcoming work on the campground feasibility study and the coastal facilities management plan, and will not be posted on the website like the questions will be. So Isabel Min with PlaceWorks is going to help facilitate the answering of the questions. If Isabel can come up. So here's Isabel Min. She will be facilitating the answering of the questions.
Thank you, Cece. Hi, everyone. So we're getting some questions online, and also we're collecting them live in person. So feel free to continue to send questions in. I will direct them to our panelists here. I think there are a couple, and I think I'll just start with one about camping. A lot of interest in overnight camping and the restoration of camping, even if hookups are not provided. So I don't know, Chris, Jordan, if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, sure. Is this microphone everyone's hearing? Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah, I think the loss of the camping is one of the hardest things about this planning process. I mean, it was clear in our efforts to understand the vulnerabilities that portion of the park, where the campground was and is and will be into the future one of the most vulnerable spots. So it made sense for us to think about more broadly than just within the confines of Seacliff State Beach, where could we relocate the lost camping opportunities? We're committed to finding that. We're committed to bringing it back. It really doesn't doesn't make sense to invest in the location where it was. So we're looking for a location within New Brighton, Seacliff, and Sunset for where we can best relocate and meet those needs. And so that camping feasibility study is going to start soon, and a lot of that will be looking at feasibility and where we can bring those opportunities back. So.
Thank you. Okay. We have a question from the online about opportunities to volunteer for habitat restoration.
Okay, good. So one of the projects that has already started is at the Esplanade. We have a living shoreline project, and part of that project has involved volunteers helping to install and maintain native plants. So that's one project, and I think the next project that will probably have that similar opportunity will be a Coastal Conservancy funded grant project that we have that will be expanding the living shoreline at the day use area. So we will be sure to post that online on our website, but I'm sure we'll have opportunities going that way.
Great. We have several questions coming in the room and also on chat about Les Olas Road. Will it remain? What the plans are for protection, if there are ongoing planning for it?
Sure. So the questions are about Las Olas Road. That's the road when you come down the main entrance that you go to the right. It was the entrance to the camping area. It's also the primary access for the Las Olas homeowners community. So that road exists now. It is both in a vulnerable area. It's also the primary access for the homeowners in that area. And so for those that haven't looked into it that carefully, the homeowners have an easement there that forever allows them access across the state park property. So that road will remain, and I think the question is how will it be maintained into the future? And so when we have looked at the concept of not rebuilding the campground there, what will replace that will be something like fortified dunes that are vegetated, probably a boardwalk for the public. The road will remain inland of that, and then over time, fortifications may have to be added to that, but there is no plan that we're suggesting that would remove that road because there is an easement there that exists.
I guess as a follow-up to that, won't a partial seawall minimize the surge damages? Has the idea of a partial seawall been explored?
I'm sorry, I could not understand that question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Won't a partial seawall minimize the surge damages?
Was there a location for that?
No, there isn't, and I think,
Okay.
we have the
I'll
Ask
try
an
to
Expert.
address that. So what we saw in some of these concepts is that rather than committing to a seawall the entire length of the beach, we're consolidating areas that would be fully protected with a seawall. And so you saw that in a couple of the concepts where parking and the restroom facilities, potentially picnic areas are going to be in those areas that we will have a protective seawall in the concept. And that is so that we can prioritize potentially elevating some of those sites as conditions worsen. That's going to be very expensive. But it also, by not building it all the way along the beach, it provides a way to have the beach become more width. That width provides resilience. And it prolongs the life of the sandy beach, because I think one of the consequences of a fixed protection like a seawall or riprap is that as sea levels rise, the beach becomes inundated more often. And so there's an actual loss of that beach. So hopefully that answers that question.
There are several questions related to restrooms and I'm sorry, close enough. Removal of existing restrooms, ADA concerns about having access to restrooms at Rio Del Mar and New Brighton.
Yeah, so, in these concepts, we have consolidated things. That doesn't mean that there wouldn't be full attention paid to the accessibility of those particular facilities. There will be. Accessibility is a top priority for us to provide in all facilities. So accessible parking, routes of travel, facilities like restrooms that are fully accessible, those will be part of the plan. There will be fewer buildings likely spread out, and they will be set back in more consolidated areas. So there will be potentially less frequent buildings than there are now, and that's just a function of the vulnerability of the resources there, and then trying to allow for space for beach width and sandy beach to exist into the future as conditions deteriorate.
Okay. I guess as related and a follow-up, a restroom at the Esplanade would be important for visitors in that area. What plans to relocate a restroom so that the Esplanade businesses would not be
Yeah, that's a really
impacted?
tough one. I get that. So when we're looking at the Esplanade, that's a very well-used restroom right there. Very well used. Very well used. And it also is in a really tough spot. It's really low in there. So when we're looking at sort of the options there, I mean, the way we'd have to elevate that to protect it, even into 2050, it was not really feasible. That being said, the need for a restroom there is not going to go away. I can totally appreciate that. One thing that we might be able to do is work with our partners and potentially with the county, who manages the parking there and potentially has property there, where we could work together on relocating a facility. We don't own that. We don't have that, potential at that location. Our ownership is right on the sand. But that's the sort of thinking that, we'll want to do going forward, and partnerships we'll want to have, because clearly there's a need. I think, there's also sort of, I wouldn't want anyone here to leave and think we're going to rip that restroom down next week. That is not going to happen. That's not where. When we look out at a concept like this, it's sort of guiding future action. So that restroom will remain for its useful life. So as it continues to serve the public, as we can repair it reasonably and it can function, it will be there. When its useful life ends, it's probably not going to be replaced. That's sort of what we're looking at with that concept. So.
Will you be able to add benches or tables in the old campground, the camping area?
Yeah, great. So those are the sorts of thoughts that we're going to have to keep working on, right? I mean, you saw sort of the concept there, but public input, what we want to put in there, what we can, and some of that will have a time frame. So maybe we can start with more picnic tables there along that stretch, and as the beach narrows over time, we have to move them. But that's flexible, and that's sort of a key to adaptation, is you're adapting as things change. But certainly we're going to want to replace those beloved places where families gather and they are able to have picnics and be together. Those are all really important things. So both in the day use side and in the campground side, I think that's something we'll be considering and figuring out how we can accommodate.
We have a couple questions about funding, how much is available and when the funding will come. And I know, Jordan, you addressed that a little bit, but any additional?
I am the budget nerd in the room, so I will take this one. So as I mentioned, we got our first deposit from FEMA the other day, and it was just enough to fix up the restrooms, so it's not nearly enough to address any kind of long-term rebuild. At this point, we have completed negotiations with FEMA. So the way the FEMA process works, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but you can, it works, right? It's a process. We have completed that process, and we've landed at around $17 million we're going to receive from FEMA for the entirety of the project. That is not anywhere near enough for what we're talking about doing. And so what that means is we're going to go through this process. We're going to figure out what the total need is, and then we're going to seek funding. We have been briefing our local elected officials. We have been bringing other agencies along that may have grant opportunities. And so we're really trying to do the right thing to start educating people early and often on the needs, because we recognize that we, from our current funding capacity, cannot do this alone.
There's a question, or there's several questions about what will be looked at as part of the camping feasibility study. Specifically, is it possible to move the campground to the top of the bluff, and which areas will be looked at?
So that camping feasibility study will cover 3 different units, and the question was specific about Seacliff, and so the top of the bluff at Seacliff will be looked at for feasibility along with multiple other sites. So New Brighton and Sunset will be included. You know, for sure, we're going to get a lot of public input on that, and people will have ideas what they want to see there. But a lot's going to go into it. You know, campgrounds are very expensive. So the investment that we make, we want to make sure, you know, that we're putting it in the place that's going to have natural resilience. We're not going to have to move it. It's not going to get damaged, but also serves the needs of the public and, you know, has the fewest impacts that we can make it have. But Seacliff will be included along with the other 2 units in that feasibility.
I think this is for Bonnie, for Friends, about the $148,000 that has been donated, and specifically what it has gone towards, restoration, staff.
Right, so the Seacliff Resilience and Recovery Fund, immediately we swung into action paying for things that State Park couldn't pay for in the moment. It went from everything from fencing that needed to go up immediately, short-term repairs, pizza for cleanup crews, just what was needed in the moment. More broadly, 2 trails have been repaired in the neighborhood, and that was also done quickly, and we partnered with the Santa Cruz Mountain Trails Stewardship Network to do that work in consultation with the neighborhood. So those trails were put back right away, and we're really proud of that work. And we do have a good amount of money to start working with parks on the future planning and making sure that we can make those dollars go as far as possible. We've also supported the public planning process, the materials, the videos, you know, the outreach that got you all involved here today. So it's being nimble and doing for parks what they ask us to do and what they might not have other ways to pay for. Seacliffresilience.org if you'd like to help.
There's a couple questions related to picnic areas, so kind of group these about the sustainability of materials for benches, what will be looked at, and also is it possible to have another trash receptacle at the top of the cliff? So about maintenance infrastructure.
Yeah, great. I think, you know, the idea that we would look towards using sustainable materials, absolutely. Similarly to how we're looking at the rebuilding of Big Basin, you know, we're looking at using technology to our advantage. Where can we use materials? Where can we use design techniques that are going to make those mountain facilities more resilient to, say, fire? The same thing, you know, would apply for this effort. Anything that we can do that's going to add resiliency, more sustainability, is something that we're going to be interested in doing. Adding trash receptacles, yes, going to do that.
Now we're getting into a little bit more specific. who owns the vacant land next to the parking lot up on the top? Would this be part of the option for RV camping at Seacliff?
Okay, so I'm going to assume we're talking about the undeveloped portion of the upper Seacliff area. It's several acres. It is fully within the state park ownership. And I think the entirety of the unit will be looked at for campground feasibility. I know in the last meeting, it was, it was very clear. We got a lot of comments that had the impacts to the neighborhood there, were expressed. So we've heard that. But I think as part of our due diligence, we'll want to look at the feasibility of that. It's certainly an area that could hold a campground. Whether that's the right spot to do it, I think that's to be determined. But it's definitely going to be part of the consideration.
Okay, getting some fun questions. Will they rebuild a snack shack? The income would support the parks and employ young folks.
That is also a big priority of mine. I think it's a really big opportunity to have something down there. I don't think you find anything at beach level like you've got there at Seacliff. So it's definitely an interest of mine to bring something back down there. Obviously, those of you who go to Seacliff frequently, know the condition of that building. So we've got some work to do there before we have something come in. But I'm definitely interested in seeing something come so that we can bring the public in, we can generate revenue, we can have, food, fun, families, we can, support a business, bring in revenue. It's definitely something that we're looking into.
Here's a question about protection what about the better storm protection for parking lot and businesses behind the beach at RDM Esplanade?
Okay, I think that's a question for the businesses that front the Esplanade there, the parking. Again, that's a very challenging site. We're definitely open to collaboration. I mean, efforts that we might work on with the county would be part of the conversation. But we're also sharing the vulnerability assessment that we've done and that information so that everyone can see sort of what the best science shows for us to expect. And hopefully we're all working together, looking at that the same way.
What will keep the new dunes at the Seacliff RV segment in place in the past, when in the past the sand gets washed out up to the seawall every year?
So sand moves around. That's what it does. It moves, and it's a dynamic system. Sand dunes are a response to winds and the way sand moves down the coast, and it is not concrete. It isn't. It definitely does move. The vegetation that's on those dunes is what captures sand grains and lets them build up, but also there are forces that tear them down, and we've all seen that. And so dunes should never be thought of as like a permanent, wall. They're not. They are part of infrastructure that is a natural infrastructure that provides elevated levels of protection, but it's not total protection. They move, they are built, they get knocked down or ripped out. And so, in some places, people are importing sand to build dunes. That's an expensive thing to do, but it's one thing to consider. In other places, they are building groins or using rock structures that influence the way sand moves on a beach. That's another thing that can be done and something that we presented. But I think that the answer is that, dunes, especially if they're built on some sort of revetment, and that's something that resists erosion. So something like really heavy wood, and the ones that we've built are built on really heavy wood that drifted in. We use that, stumps and big logs, that underpins the dune. And so yeah, sand will move, but there's structure there to build it back in when the sand moves that way. So I think it's fair to say that dunes they're part of a natural system, and the ones that would be used as protection would likely be underpinned by either heavy wood or some sort of cobble. Down south, we've seen projects where they have intentionally brought in extra cobble and rock as an underlayment before they build the dunes, and that gives them extra protection. So this would be a great question also to talk to the experts afterwards. I think there's folks that we can talk to after this that have even more information about it.
For now, to protect the public, why weren't the metal barriers put up this year at Seacliff? Thousands were spent on them.
Sorry, it's really hard to hear up here.
About protecting the public now, why weren't the metal barriers put up this year?
Okay, good, got it that time. So this question is about the crowd control barriers, which I think anyone who's been down there has seen that we've used at different points. They were really purchased after the major damage so that we could quickly provide visible and some physical protection so the public could see where the danger zones were and to try to stay out of that. We're trying to use them more sparingly now because it's a lot of work to move them in and out. They get damaged. And we have found, based on our public safety folks, that the use that's happening now, people are used to the condition. And so we have moved to more signage and less physical barriers. But we're still reserving the physical barriers for where we have erosion and things that are inherently, where there's drop-offs and things like that, but we are trying to use it less.
Okay, I know we have time for just a couple more. What restoration is planned for the private houses, the houses themselves, just south of the Rio parking lot?
And scope for us really is focused on public facilities. So you saw that in the concepts there. And so we're using public money, and these concepts that we're putting out are focused on protecting the public facilities that will be paid for by those public funds. For the most part, privately owned property and privately owned facilities are outside that scope. There may be some ancillary benefit to some of the things we do, there may or not, but that's why you don't see more of the private property built into these concepts.
Okay, and would the Seacliff proposal include restoring the walking path, or would the road be the only option?
Okay, so on either side, both the day use and in the former campground area, I think the concept looks at making sure there's some sort of promenade. It's certainly in the short term, what does that look like? Maybe it's a boardwalk, maybe not, maybe it's something else. But the thinking here is not that, I think the thinking is that there's going to be progression. As conditions change, as the beach width changes, we will have different options. But we heard loud and clear that a promenade, the ability to walk, along the bottom edge of the bluff is something that's really important. So that will be a focus to try and maintain that in public access for as long as is feasible.
Great, thank you so much for addressing those questions. Bonnie, Chris, and Jordan, we really appreciate you taking those questions and answering them. As we stated earlier, the questions and the answers will be on the website. Any questions we didn't get to will also be up there. We want to save time for the Ask an Expert tables that we have set up outside. So we want to thank all the participants here in person and online for dedicating your time to being here tonight and learning about this project. For everyone who is here in person, we have light refreshments outside with the Ask an Expert table where you can ask detailed questions, specific questions about any of the sites. The drawings that you saw up here are out there on board, so you can look at the details of those for all 5 of those locations we were looking at. And then we also have a table set up with information about other coastal projects in the region. And at that table, you can learn about State Parks' work with UC San Diego's Scripps Institute of Oceanography's California Coastal Monitoring Project at Seacliff, and State Parks' collaboration with Cabrillo College's Ocean 20 class, which is studying coastal monitoring. So there's good information there. There are also resources about the Rio Del Mar Living Shoreline Project, the Monterey Bay Living Shoreline Program, which covers Santa Cruz and Monterey counties, and the County of Santa Cruz's ongoing sea level rise vulnerability analysis. Thank you again, everyone. Have a good evening.